Who is our speaker? Well, and I'll give a very short introduction. Sherry Conti Rogers of CASA Southeast is joining us today, and I don't think a lot of us remembered that CASA Southeast now has an office here in Vermillion at the community center is all I can think. The Community Engagement Center. Connection Center. Oh, it's 3 C's. Community Connection Center, and I had forgotten that while I was looking, before I looked for her email address. Now, I did discover a couple of interesting things. First, she graduated from Northern. So thank goodness, at least, she skipped over that school between us and graduated from Northern. Second, she graduated from high school from Gettysburg, South Dakota. And I will add that she just happened to move there from the Twin Cities to attend high school. So I think that movement from the Twin Cities to Gettysburg, South Dakota had to be one of the most easily accomplished and acclimated things possible. I mean, how can you not win going from Minneapolis to Gettysburg? So Sherry Conti Rogers is here to talk to us about CASA, which is one of the things I believe that Rotary supports on a regular basis. Am I correct in that? Oh, okay, we have in the past. I thought, wow, I've just become a lawyer and lawyer, potato, and have just managed to, embarrass ourselves. So without any further ado, Sherry, thank you for joining us and welcome back. So.
Well, who knew when I was having a conversation at the table that all that would be shared with the rest of you? I can't remember the last time I told anybody I went to high school in Gettysburg. Anybody even know where that is? Oh, good. The reason we moved there, a lot of people don't know, but there is a radar site right north of Gettysburg that tracks all the aircraft that go across this upper Midwest part of the country. And my stepfather was an air traffic control supervisor, so that's why we ended up in Gettysburg. But I have never left South Dakota since, so I consider South Dakota my home, even though, hasn't always been. So thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. I'm always just so happy to come and share information about the Southeast CASA program. And I was with you about a year ago, but it was on Zoom, and I think we had some technical issues, or I don't know. I remember sitting at my computer not knowing what was being shown to you, and so I was hoping that the right slides were being shown at the right time. And so anyway, it's much nicer to be with you in person, that's for sure. Southeast CASA has been around for 10 years, and we started in Yankton County, and in 2015, after we were in existence for 5 years, we added Clay County to our service area. So we've been here in Clay County for 6 years, but a lot of you might be aware of that, but I think in general the population around here is maybe not so aware of what we do. So hopefully that you can share some of the information that I'm going to share with you with others so that we can raise some awareness about what we do, because I do feel, and I hope you'll agree, that it's really important that we have this program. Okay, so I have to be able to read here. For those of you who don't know or don't remember what CASA does, I'm going to start with a quick overview. CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. So when you break that apart, as the name implies, we work with the court system, and we train people to be advocates for a very special group, and that group are children who have been abused or neglected. We now serve children in 5 counties. I mentioned we started in Yankton and we added Clay. We have since added Bonhomme, Union, and Turner counties to our service area. But that is the extent of our expansion, and so we will be staying at those 5 counties. But as you can imagine, Yankton County and Clay County are our 2 busiest counties. A CASA volunteer is assigned by a court order to advocate for the best interests of abused and neglected children. So 2 things have to happen before CASA can be involved in a case. First, kids have been removed and placed into the state's custody due to some kind of a safety issue, whether it's there's no one to care for them, or if they've been harmed in some way, or they're in an unsafe situation and the parents can't provide that necessary care. Step 2 is the local state's attorney sees the reasons that the children were removed and files a petition of abuse or neglect against the parents. And that starts this whole court proceeding. At that point, CASA becomes involved. We match the child or the children in that family with one of our highly trained CASA volunteers who best meets their needs. We have volunteers who have experience in education, the medical field. They have a cultural background that might be similar to the children. Or, as the case of most of our volunteers, they've been parents or grandparents themselves. And so we do try to match up as best we can the needs of the children with the expertise of our volunteers. There becomes a court order of appointment issuing the CASA volunteer as the advocate for the children in this particular case. They advocate for all of the children in the family, and we've had families with 5 and 6 children pretty regularly, and you can imagine if you're the advocate for all 6 kids, that's quite a lot of work. However, most of the time, a lot of the other people involved in the case are the same people for all children, and so it's not 6 times the work, but it is a little more work than advocating for 1 or 2, which is typically what we see. The CASA volunteer knows that this is a commitment of the better part of a year because a CASA case lasts an average of 11 months. There is a state statute that says these abuse and neglect cases need to be wrapped up by 12 months unless there's an extenuating reason that the judge would extend it. So most cases last about 11 months. The CASA volunteer gets to know the child or the children in the case and anybody else who's involved in that family's life. Excuse me. Our requirement is that they see the children at least once a month, but what we've found is most of our volunteers visit with the children 2 or 3 times a month just to check in with them. These cases are highly confidential, so the general public doesn't hear about these situations. But not hearing about them does not mean that they are not happening. Local children are involved in some pretty horrible situations that are no fault of their own. We're glad that CASA is available here in Clay County to help them get into a better situation. During the last year of COVID, our CASA volunteers had to adjust their methods of checking in with the children and the others involved in the case so as to keep everyone safe from the virus. So it's been quite an adjustment of a year, and we've pretty much gotten back to normal, but we still observe, the safe distancing and sometimes the mask wearing depending on the comfort level of who we're talking with or the comfort level of the volunteer. And we had some volunteers who took the year off because they just didn't want to even make an attempt to advocate during those situations. So everybody's kind of back on board. However, during all that time, we never stopped advocating and we never had a case on the waiting list. So we're happy about that. A CASA volunteer gets to know the parents and the others, the foster parents, the social worker, the attorneys. Sometimes it's the kids' teachers, counselors, medical providers, daycare providers. They also get to know the parents, people in the parents' world, whether there's an issue with housing or employment or treatment, they can contact those people as well. They observe some of the supervised visits between parents and children and observe to see, what is their interaction like? And it always astounds me when I get a report back that says that the volunteer observed the 2-hour visit, and during that time, the parents spent an hour and 20 minutes on their phone ignoring their child. And it's like, in 2 weeks, you've got one visit and you spend it looking at your phone. I'll never understand that, but that does happen. The CASA volunteer can verify things that are issues for the parents, such as their employment status or their treatment progress or the condition of their home. Whatever the issues are, we try to kind of keep tabs on how those things are going and report whether they're going well or not going well. Consider for a moment just how many cases each of the people on this list work at any one time. A social worker has an average of 24 cases at a time, 24 families, and that's families of just a couple or families of, like I said, 6 kids maybe. And sometimes we have families that have more than one dad and stepkids and all that. An attorney, attorneys have many, many cases at any one time. But the CASA volunteer has just one case at a time, and they can really focus and stay on top of what's going on with that family. And so that's quite an advantage in the case. The CASA volunteer can recommend things to social services and the court for the children's well-being, such as counseling or dental services or vision care. Whatever the child might need, we can advocate during the case for that, as well as our ultimate goal of advocating for their permanent home. A judge receives a report from CASA at each court hearing, and they happen about every 60 days. They kind of get an update on the case. The CASA volunteer provides factual information about how the children are doing and how each parent is doing, and they note the improvements and concerns. CASA has often been referred to by a judge as the eyes and ears of the court in the community. The information in the CASA reports to the court helps the judge to determine the safety level of returning the children to the custody of the parents. Information is often brought forth that helps to end the case sooner, or we let the court know that the children's safety could not yet be assured if they were to return home to their parents. A judge needs these facts in order to make the best decision for the child's permanent home. I don't know about you, but I would not want to make that crucial decision without as much factual information as I could get. The majority of children in CASA cases do return home, about 77% of the time. Was the last time I crunched the numbers. Parents made the necessary improvements to have that level of basic safety for their children. With the supports offered to the parents by social services and the courts and other agencies, many parents can become drug-free or find and keep a home or maintain employment and learn how to provide a good home for their children. The parents' ability to show growth and maintain any improvements in their parenting are keys to success. However, that means that some kids, if you do the math, it's 23% of the kids cannot return home because it would not be reliably demonstrated that they could be safe. So we have had cases in which the parents are unable to make changes. Maybe they're very low functioning, or have some debilitative medical conditions. We have a parent right now who has Huntington's disease, and it is getting to be to the point where she can't even take care of herself, let alone a child with special needs. However, that's not the only reason that she will not be getting her child back. But sometimes parents are just uninterested and unwilling to do those necessary changes in how they raise their kids or provide the home or take care of their family in order to show that they could take care of their children. And I know you and I could never imagine not caring about getting our kids back, but believe me, it does happen. In those cases, the court has to determine an alternative placement for the children, and that would be either with a guardian, who is usually a relative, who would have then the legal custody to raise the children or child, or the parents' rights are terminated and the children can be put up for adoption. And that sometimes happens when the children are quite young and there isn't a relative who is willing to be the guardian. Remember, a successful outcome in these cases is the children are going to be in a safe, permanent home. Foster care is not permanent. It's safe, but it's not permanent. And so if they can't be with the parents because they can't be safe there, then the best outcome for the children is to have a guardian or an adoptive family. One thing that I'd like you to remember is that the cost of providing a CASA volunteer for a child or children in the family the whole time a case is open is the same amount as what it costs for just 1 month of foster care. If CASA can provide information that assures the court of a final decision 1 or 2 months earlier than the average, then that's a cost savings to all of us as taxpayers. I also want to remind you that there is a hidden cost of abuse or neglect in our society. The more adverse childhood experiences that a child has, the more likely that there will be negative impacts into adulthood on their relationships, their education level, their employment, their health, and even their lifespan. It's imperative that we prevent or curtail abuse or neglect whenever we can, so that children can have the best chance at a good adulthood as possible. I'm happy to tell you that we have 7 CASA volunteers here in Clay County, and 1 more is currently in training to join that group. We always need more people to be CASA volunteers, so if that is something of interest to you, we would love to chat with you. Having enough trained CASA volunteers has allowed us to provide a CASA advocate for 100% of the children who are eligible for our services. Remember those 2 criteria: removed from the home due to abuse or neglect. Parents are charged in court with abuse or neglect. So every child who's been in that situation in the 5 counties that we serve, as we've grown, we've always maintained that 100% service rate, which not every program can say, and I'm really, really proud of that. Until 6 years ago, no child in Clay County had a voice in court when a decision about his or her future was being determined. As I mentioned, we started here in July of 2015, and our first 2 CASA volunteers here in Clay County were Joanne Tiemann and Rhonda Howe. We're so proud to know that since that time, every one of these abused or neglected kids have had or do have right now someone advocating for their best interests in the determination of a safe, permanent home, just because this program is serving Clay County. Last year, there were 19 children served in Clay County. So you'll notice last year there were 51 kids total in our 5 counties. And believe me when I say there's a difference between the counties. I think we had 2 cases in Bonhomme County and only 1 in Turner. And so the majority of those 51 kids come from Yankton and Clay County. Union County is a distant third. Thus far this year, we have 9 children in Clay County who currently have a CASA volunteer. So you may be wondering, what kind of situations are going on in these kids' lives that they need to be removed from their homes in order to be safe? Most of the children have been severely neglected. We don't very often have cases that are based on abuse, but when we do, it's pretty horrific abuse. In Clay County, last year and this year, all of the children that we advocated for had been severely neglected. 17 of the 19, and this year 7 of the 9, are in foster care due to neglect caused by parental drug abuse. The parents care more about their drug seeking and drug using than they do about making sure their kids have something to eat, that they're supervised, and that they have a roof over their heads. Our cases usually involve children who are not yet in school. Most of the kids we serve are under the age of 5. So think about that. How vulnerable are you if nobody's really raising you or taking care of you if you're a toddler? We've also had children who are physically abused and a few who have been sexually abused. We've had children who were abandoned by their parents due to mental health issues or running from the law due to their drug abuse, or both. We've had cases in which the family is homeless or one or both parents are not working or are sentenced to jail or prison. Some of the living conditions, as you can see here, are dangerous and unsanitary, and kids often are not provided with adequate meals, supervision, or medical care. Sounds pretty hopeless, doesn't it? But it is not. When kids are removed from a dangerous environment by social services and the courts and are placed into a foster home, they immediately begin to thrive. We've seen some parents make huge turnarounds in their behaviors in order to get their children back into their custody. It's like they have had this giant wake-up call, and it really changes everything. CASA is there to report when parents are doing well on the road to regaining custody of their children, as well as to report any concerns that may negatively impact the children. So when parents do better, CASA reflects that. Sometimes that misconception is that CASA is there to make sure the kids don't go back to their parents, and that is absolutely not true. We want to see that happen, but we're not going to recommend that a child goes back to a bad situation. I'm often asked, how is our program funded? As you can see, we need a variety of funding sources in order to maintain our ability to serve 100% of those kids. Clay County is our second largest caseload, and local support is necessary. How many of you have ever attended one of our Red Shoe Gala fundraisers? I knew we'd have one hand at least. They're really fun. However, last year we couldn't have one because of COVID. And that's the fundraiser that we do here in Vermillion each year. And it's a really fun event with dueling pianos and lots of games and activities and raffles. We have had to cancel 3 major fundraisers in the last year because of COVID. And so this year we're going to try something new that we hope will be a little bit safer because it's mostly outdoors, and we're going to have a golf tournament called Swinging for Hope. It's going to be, I don't know if you can read that from back there, but it's on August 29th, which is a Sunday, in the afternoon, and it's super easy to sign up if you go to southeastcasa.org/golf. And we are encouraging teams of 4 to sign up, and we'll have some fun activities along the course, and the registration fee includes 2 carts for the foursome and lunch for everybody, and a lot of fun in the afternoon. And we do really work hard to put the fun in fundraising, so I really, really invite you to come and join us on August 29th at the Bluffs. This will be our one and only fundraiser this year, And so we're really hoping for a good turnout. I have to say, I'm not a golfer, and so the planning for this is kind of like, I'm leaving it up to about everybody else on the board. So, but it does look like it'll be fun. Some of you may know, although I didn't tell Tim this, I worked at South Dakota Public Broadcasting for 10 years prior to working with CASA. Mr. Rogers is one of my heroes, and it's not just because my maiden name was Rogers. Note the last line in his quote. I can honestly say that anyone who does anything to help a child is a hero to me. Ugh, I can never read that without getting choked up. A CASA volunteer protects the best interests of an abused or neglected child by being the eyes and ears of the court in the community. I think you'll agree that our CASA volunteers, as well as the people who support their work, are heroes for our kids. One of the things that we do is we participate in Child Abuse Prevention Month, which is every April, and it's a national movement to raise awareness about how important it is to prevent child abuse. And one of the things that we do, the national symbol is blue pinwheels, and so it's so hard to see. We put out pinwheel displays of blue pinwheels, and each pinwheel represents one child that we served the year before. So in this display in front of Sanford's marquee, and if I know you can't read it, but it does say April is Child Abuse Prevention Month on their marquee, and they've got about 20 staff out there with their masks on in front behind the sign. But there are 51 pinwheels, because if you remember, last year we had 51 kids that we advocated for, which, by the way, was less than the years before, but we think that COVID had some kind of an impact on fewer eyes were on the kids, and so fewer reports were made about concerns. So we'll see how this year pans out. We had 4 displays in Vermillion in the month of April, a week at each place. First Dakota, Sanford, the Kappa Alpha Theta sorority house, the CASA is their philanthropy, and at the library. And we also had them in 4 places in Yankton for a week. And so it raised some good awareness. There was an article in the paper. So that's one of the more fun things that we do. I think I can safely say that we all believe that every child deserves to grow up in a safe, permanent, nurturing, loving home. In fact, it's in our best interest to make sure that children, even those who are not our children, have safe, permanent, and loving homes so they can be the best that they can be for the future. So these are ways that you might want to consider. Notice there is attend a CASA fundraising event, so if you like to golf and you want to come out and help us, you really are helping us. The easiest thing of all is how I started today, is like if you can tell others that there is a CASA program and what we do in a nutshell. We advocate in court for abused and neglected kids to make sure that they are in a safe, permanent home. That would be huge and a great help to us. We're always looking for board members from each county, and perhaps you have a business that would want to get a little more involved. So that would be lovely if you would like to do that too. So with that, there is no place like hope. Notice the red shoes. That's why we have a red shoe gala. There's no place like home. Well, there's also no place like hope. So I would love to answer any questions any of you might have, but thank you so very much for inviting me to come and for being so attentive and for any support that you've shown the program in the past. I know there are several of you here who have already donated to CASA, and we so appreciate that. And our goal is to make sure that each county supports the services that we provide in that county. And so it's really important that local support comes through for these kids. So I would like to entertain any questions that you might have. Yes, ma'am?
You said that a lot of your youngsters are under 5, so they're not in the school system.
Right.
How do you find out about the need? How is it reported?
Oftentimes, reports come from neighbors. Sometimes reports actually come from a relative who's very concerned. Sometimes the report comes typically from a teacher. Now, if you have a child who's not in school, but some of these kids do go to Head Start or preschool, but most of them don't. So it's like somebody, that's why it's so hard to even, to have these kids get missed. I mean, it's very easy for things to kind of be kept under the radar. But there are occasions when the parents get in trouble, and because they're in such severe trouble, like they're being arrested for drug use and being put in jail, then the next question is, who's going to watch your kids? And so that sometimes is a reason that they get placed in placement. So there are a lot of different scenarios, but sometimes it's a law enforcement referral, and sometimes it's just a citizen referral. And sometimes it takes many referrals before, and they'll go out and check, and they'll say, well, no, it doesn't rise to the level of needing to remove the children. And sometimes it takes several referrals before some action will be taken. They do try to work with the families to prevent having to remove the children. So if they can provide some interventions that help, then that's great. But as I said, these are the most extreme cases that come across law enforcement or the legal system's radar. Yes, sir.
Yes, is there not a child protection service within the state services? And if there is CASA filling in for their inability to cover all the time?
We one of our partners, we're partners with the courts, and we're partners with the social services, child protection services. So you have an office right here in Vermillion that covers, this area. They are the people that make the decision to remove the children and get the court order to do so and place them into a foster home and monitor that foster home. They also write up a plan for the parents on, these are the things you need to work on and do before, we can recommend to the court that you get your kids back. So they're working more with the parent. So after the petition's been filed in court and the court hearing process starts, and that usually is within 48 hours, that's when we get involved. So we're not the people that have removed the children, and we're not the people that are telling the parents what they have to do, but we work closely with social services, and sometimes we check in with the parents more frequently than they do, just to say, how's it going? And maybe 3 or 4 months in, the parents still haven't gotten employment, and we can check with them, and then when we find out that they have employment, we can kind of let social services know. Or if social services has reported, yes, the parents are employed, and then we check with them a few weeks later and they've already been fired, then we can say, hey, we just talked to the employer and they're no longer working there. So we can fill in some facts to child protection so that it eases their burden a little bit, but we're not doing their job. Our role is to focus on what is best for these kids and how are things going so that the kids, if they were sent back, would be safe. And so that's why we need to find out and talk with all these people. But truly, it's the responsibility of child protection to kind of determine what the parents are supposed to be working on. We can just sort of verify that they're working on those things. Does that answer your question? Yeah. There are child protection offices, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Totally out of the league to take care of the problems.
The problems are huge, and they're typically understaffed, and they have a lot of staff turnover. And so what we've noticed a lot is child protection is a really hard job. And they have too many cases for each worker, and then they kind of get to the point where they just like, I just can't do this, and they go on to something that's a little less emotionally taxing. And so we're a lot more constant and stable in these kids' lives than the child protection workers are. It's not unusual for us to have to work with 2 or 3 during the year that the case is open. And they really are shorthanded. Right now, we have a case that there aren't enough child protection workers in Yankton County, so we're pulling some from Davison County to come and take a case in our jurisdiction over there. They're really shorthanded. So the services that we provide supplement what they do, but it doesn't replace what they do. Yes?
Do foster parents serve as CASA volunteers, or is that seen as a conflict?
We have had people who have been foster parents who decide that they want to do something in a different way to help these kids. We've never had anybody who's a current foster parent be a CASA volunteer. If they did, they wouldn't be able to be the CASA advocate for the kids that are placed with them. It would have to be a whole different case. So I think most foster parents, when you think about it, they're pretty overwhelmed with the 24/7 duties that they don't really have the time to add in. And a CASA volunteer probably puts in 8 to 10 hours a month on their cases. I think I'm out of time. If you would like to ask me any other questions, I'm so sorry, I keep hitting this thing. I will be here for a little bit afterwards. But thank you so very much. I appreciate your attention.